I won't be here for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's enough for you to ask a good question. Okay. So let's.
No.
I spoke to him yesterday. He was he actually came down with COVID, so he couldn't come in.
Oh, wow.
But he's feeling fine. He said today might be his last day out, and then tomorrow I think he's Aaron, the Chabad fellow came. So yeah, said Mr. Shem said he'll be here tomorrow.
He doesn't want us to know, right?
No, he wasn't keeping it private. I just think yeah, absolutely. Okay, so today's daf Chaf. Just again, I like to give a heads up on the time so that we don't get nervous if we're spending too much time on daf Chaf. We're going to go to the Mishnah on Chaf Mid Beis. We're not going to start the Mishnah. Mishnah is going to be discussing differences between Kodesh, Hegdish, and Truma. We'll get to that Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. Because if you'll take a look at Chaf Aleph, Omid Aleph, and Omid Beis is really, I don't want to say no big deal. It's a big deal, but it's short daf on both sides. It's probably less Gemara between the Mishnah and the entire daf Chaf Aleph than there is even on Omid Aleph of daf Chaf. So we'll split it up and we find on time.
So we're finishing the parak.
Today, Mitzvah Shem will finish the parak. That's the plan. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. The Tumah V'Tara continues. I didn't mention this earlier. Why are we discussing Tumah V'Tara now? We mentioned it's because that we'll see it by the end of the parak, at the end of the Masechta, there are going to be some nafkaminas for Yontif, for this Tumah V'Tara. The question is, why did it start at the end of the second parak and not just start a whole new parak with the Yontif Tumah V'Tara? Because if you look at the last Mishnah in the second parak before that, was talking about all of the issues with Stukim, so we didn't want to leave off with the Stukim. Okay, either way, Daf Chaf, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we need to discuss is, we sort of touched on this before, if you remember, the Mishnah on Daf Yud Ches, on Beis, really had three discussions, and in each one of those discussions, we were discussing three separate halachas. The first halacha was a question of whether one requires netilas yadayim for when their hands become tameh, and we then listed off different categories. We had chulin, meiser sheni, truma, hegdish, and mechatas. And for each one of them, a little bit of a higher madrega of kedusha exists, so therefore their susceptibility to tumah is going to be a little bit more vulnerable. Then the second case that was discussed over there in the Mishnah was about when someone goes into the mikveh for a full body tumah, he has to have thoughts about what he's coming out of the mikveh to become tahor from. That's a din derabanan also, meaning minat Torah. You drop in the mikveh, whether you're thinking about it or not, you're good to go. But midarabanan, we said we want you to have kavanah, we want you to have intent that when you're going in, you're intending to become tahor from a specific thing. Now you can have generic intent to become tahor from everything. That's fine also. That's called intent. But if you're just going in without thinking, or if you're thinking specifically for one type of tumah, not for another, so now what we said over there is the tumah that you're thinking about matters. So we said if you're thinking about chulin, meaning if you're someone who is makbid to only eat chulin being tahor yourself, which is a frum thing, it's a chumrah, not necessary, but some of those people, we'll get to that in a minute, would do that. Then you're going to be tahor for that, but not tahor for meiser sheni, and meiser sheni for truma for hegdish, and then hegdish again for mechad. So again, we listed off all five. And then the third case we mentioned in the Mishnah, also, that was a little bit more of a complicated halacha, but basically the idea was that not only, and this is what's going to be relevant for our Gemara, not only is it important for a person to not eat something that's tameh, or he, when he's tameh, not eat hegdish, truma, meiser sheni, but also if a person is, let's say, borrowing something from someone else, they have to know, similar to kashrus, can I go ahead and eat in this guy's house or that guy's house?
Is that a common question that people ask, like when they borrow?
Well, tumah and tara nowadays not so much, but
I'm saying back then, I'm saying
buying something from
an amoritz is what we're discussing here. Demai, which the entire mitzvah for demai is predicated on the idea of an amoritz. We'll get to that now, and then also an amid base. So the third case of the Mishnah is a case where I'm, let's say, borrowing clothing from someone, and that person might have he might be a triangle K guy, and I'm a star K guy. So can I eat everything that he has? I have to make sure. With tumah, there's a similar concept. You have an amoritz. He's makbid on only maybe not, he won't blatantly maybe be matama his items, but he's not so smart, or even if he's smart, he just doesn't know the halachas. Since he doesn't know, I can't trust that everything he's sending to me was either dropped into the mikveh properly, or that his wife was Anita didn't sit on it. And we spoke out yesterday that's one of the ways that you can make something tameh. So that's an amoritz. So an amoritz handing something over to someone who is not an amoritz, he's an intelligent person, knows the halachas and tries to be makbid on them, he has to be concerned that perhaps she was Anita. But we also saw another chiddush in the Mishnah that's true. Literally, the word just means a nation of the land. But really, what we mean to say is simple folk who don't know the halacha. That's
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
speaking. That sometimes Amaretz, depends on the context, also have actual like malintent. Most of the times, the converse, that was very good. Thanks for that. But most of the times, that's not the case. Most of the times, it's just a simple byproduct of their ignorance.
It's ignorance.
Their ignorance creates a problem. Like, I think kashrus for us nowadays is a very easy transfer, meaning I want to eat at this person's house. They're the frummest people in the world, but they're literally ignorant of the halacha. So, or like my parents, they go away sometimes, they want to know, can they eat in this restaurant, can they eat in that restaurant? They have to know, like, is the person running the restaurant who we don't know, are they not just Shomer Torah mitzvahs, are they knowledgeable enough to know, well, I need to double cover it here, or I need to cover, you have to know the halachas, and sometimes that can be an issue also. So the same thing goes with Tumah and Tahara. That's the third case of our Mishnah. Now, the interesting thing is, in our Mishnah, we listed off a category that we didn't really define so much when we read the Mishnah, and that was the Prushim. Normally, when we talk about Prushim from a historical perspective, we're talking about Prushim, meaning as a contrast to the Tzdukim or as a contrast to other people. However, the Masoretic people, let's say.
That's Pharisees.
Pharisees, thank you. Right? So now,
Those are like, and what is that specifically?
they're what we would call our Orthodox Jews. I mean, that like for really a bad. The Pharisees, the Prushim.
Were against the Sadducees who changed all kinds of halachos.
So the Tzdukim versus the Prushim. So we would be considered Prushim.
The literal word, like.
Prushim Parush means to be separate.
Those are the ones that always say like literal, that like the one. Like
That's the Tzdukim. The Tzdukim are the
literal word.
Yeah, there's a couple of different sects that seem to have similar philosophies. We generally bunch them all together. Like for instance, it says Lo Sevaru, so therefore it means you can't have any fire.
Right.
Even something that was from before Shabbos. They have many examples of that. The classic example, the one that came up the other day, is their interpretation of when we celebrate Shavuos. They understand the pasuk when it says Mimacharas Shabbos to literally mean it's got to be a Sunday. Whereas we understand it to mean the day after Pesach is starting to count, so 50 days later is always whatever that day is. But either way, the Prushim in our Mishnah is referring to, at least as it relates to Tumah, people who are, they're machmir. Now, what's their chumrah? Their chumrah is as follows: that although if I was a Kohen eating truma, I have really me'ikra din certain halachas I have to be stringent about so that I don't become tameh, or it doesn't become tameh up to we said a shlishi. And we said if I'm someone who eats hegdish or I'm eating hegdish, I have to be makbid to make sure that I'm not tameh, and the item that I'm eating isn't tameh, or that it can't become tameh, all the way up to a revi. But chulin, we said, regular chulin can only become a sheni. That means if I have chulin that's tameh, like someone, I don't know, let's say there was a nida. The nida is an av. She went ahead and grabbed a spoon. That spoon became a rishon, and that spoon went into a bowl of cornflakes. The bowl of cornflakes is a sheni. If that bowl of cornflakes now spills onto whatever, my table does not become a shlishi. If it falls on food, other types of food, the food doesn't become a shlishi. It stops at a sheni. Now that means that the rest of us, a normal person, really doesn't have to worry when you're eating chulin at all. Midaraisa, midarabana, there is just absolutely no concern from a tumah perspective. The concern for tumah only really starts when you're eating truma. Prushim are people who said, you know what, I'm going to only eat my chulin v'tahara, meaning I'll make sure my hands are clean and I will make sure that my body is clean, which means I'll go into the mikveh. So that means such a person, just imagine what life is like for that person in their house, meaning the rest of us are just sort of walking around not thinking twice. And they, whatever they do, whatever they touch, wherever they go, they're constantly making sure that their hands aren't touching tumah. They're monitoring tumah to make sure. Now, how much of a monitoring are they doing? Up until a sheni for chulin, which means if someone else has sheni chulin, they're not nervous about it. They'll go over and touch it, no big deal. It'll touch their food. It doesn't make it a shlishi because chulin cannot become a shlishi. That's called prushim. There's another category that's not mentioned in the Mishnah, and it could be confused with what I just described as a prushin. Another way to say prushin, by the way, would be ochlin, chulin, betahara, but we'll say prushim. It makes things simple. There's another category, okay, and this category is what we're going to discuss now in the Gemara, which is a category called chulin shena'asu al taharas hakodesh. The distinction between Prushim and this is just a very simple distinction. The distinction is Prushim are makbid for the Shmira. They try to watch over their chulin up to a sheni. Chulin al Taharas HaKodesh says, I'm going to treat my chulin no different than I would treat Hegdish. Hegdish, we said, can not only become a shlishi, it can even become a revi. Right? That's a high madreg of Hegdish, means it's more vulnerable to tumah, so therefore it can even become a revi. So now you have a guy whether he's eating kachim, he's not eating kachim. But the point is, he treats all the food in his house. When you go over to his house, not only is it glatt, not only does he have every bedatz, edah, charedis on it, it has like a special shmira that he checks every single square inch of every single part of that bat. Meaning he goes way, way beyond the ikar hadin. Not only that it's going to be something that he'll only eat if he's tahor, if it's regular chulin, and it's let's say a sheni or a shlishi, it won't become a shlishi. He'll treat his chulin as if it can become a shlishi. He'll treat his chulin as if it can become a revi. He's a very frum. This is even frummer than the prushim. Now, the question is, prushim are mentioned in our Mishnah. That's a real thing. The prushim have a halachic status, a halachic reality. They are higher than someone who's an amaretz, and they are lower than someone who's a truma. When I say lower, I just mean the level of shmira required, and therefore the halachas that apply to them. This one I just mentioned, I just made it up, it seems, right? Meaning that's not mentioned in our Mishnah.
It's mentioned at the end of the Mishnah, maybe.
So we'll get to that. The Gemara is going to discuss that today. Yeah. So in an explicit sense, there's no mention in each one of those three cases I just went through. We mentioned chulin, meiser sheni, truma, hegdesh, mechatas. And nowhere in there did I say chulin shenasu al taras hegdesh. Kodesh. We didn't mention it at all. The implication is either it's just not a thing, or if it is a thing, it's somewhere already covered in those five. Says Rav Mari, I look at our Mishnah, this is the start of today's Gemara, and all of this Akdam is really for about 4 lines of Gemara, but would it be impossible to understand without it? Rav Mari is going to say, I look at the Mishnah, and I find that this halacha of a person who's makbid to only eat their chulin the same way they would treat hegdish, meaning all the way up to it potentially becoming a revi'i, I understand from our Mishnah that halachically his chulin has a status of hegdish, at least as it relates to tumah. Now, where does he see it? The way I just explained it, there's nothing in the Mishnah to this effect almost. So where does he find in the Mishnah that this din is even true? That this person, again, we're not discussing whether a person's allowed to act. If a person wants to be from, let him be from. Like, as long as he's not hurting anyone, it's no big deal. But to tell me that if, let's say, his chulin, we're going to treat it like hegdish, that means that if it touches truma, it's going to be matama the truma. If it touches other hegdish, it'll be matama the hegdish. That hegdish will become tameh. Do we say that this person who's makbid, his stuff takes on a status of hegdish and truma, or no? It's just something in his own head. If he wants to do it, let him do it. This is a question. Our Gemara says, Ramari, our Mishnah is going to be a makar that it's a real halacha. Now, just a quick hakdama, one more piece. This is actually a discussion in other places. There's other Gemara, I forget where the Gemara is. Did I write it down? No, I didn't. So it's a machlekes. If I can find it quickly, I don't remember where the Gemara is. It's a machlekes tanaim, whether this is actually a halacha or not. It's the Chachamim.
35a is a chulin.
Thank you, Chulin.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
The Gemara in Chulin says it's a machlekes Abashol and the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that it's a real thing, that you can turn Chulin into a shlishi and a revi if you're someone who's makbid to watch over it in this way, meaning you're acting like this very religious person. Abashol says no. That's not true. It can't become hegdish. That is the very oversimplified version of this machlek is what's relevant for our Gemara. Says Rav Mari, I look at our Mishnah and I see like the Chachamim. I look at our Mishnah and I see that the halacha is a person who's makbid to watch his chulin this way. He's nas chulin hanasa al taras hakodesh, has a din of kodesh. It has a din of kodesh that the halacha is that it can become a shlishi, it can become a revi. Let's see it inside. Amar of Mari, Shma mina from our Mishnah, Chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh, ki kodesh damu. All of that for that one line. Says the Gemara, Mimai, how do you read our Mishnah and find it? He says, what do you mean? Midaloi ketani behu maila. He says, from the fact, and this is very counterintuitive to me, from the fact that it's not mentioned as its own maila, it doesn't get its own category, he says, right? Meaning to say, and this the Rishonim have a hard time with, but the way they explain it is from the fact that it's not mentioned as a separate thing.
Always as a precept.
Yeah. So he says this is how Rashi has a very difficult read here. So we're going to say it sort of generically because it's going to be an amalgam of different Rishonim. They effectively say, I read the Mishnah, I don't see it explicitly mentioned as a separate category. That means it's not chulin, it's not truma, it's not meiser. It must be that it fits into hegdish. This is how the Rishonim speak it out. It must be, meaning, had it been that it was a separate category and it's not hegdish, it would have been listed somewhere, maybe between truma and hegdish, maybe between meiser sheni and truma, maybe between chulin and truma, chulin and meiser sheni. But the fact that it's not listed tells me that it's covered already by one of the items in the Mishnah. Now, of course, an intelligent person is going to ask, who says it's covered by hegdish and not covered by chulin? I mean, that's really the question. In fact, that's the havmin of the Gemaskana. But says Rav Mari, I look in the Mishnah and I see that it's there. The Gemara says where? From the fact that it doesn't mention It's not mentioned, and therefore you're assuming it's hegdish. Immediately says the Gemara, "V'dilma haidaloi kitani behu ma'ila." Maybe the reason why it's not mentioned is not because it's included in hegdish, because maybe it goes in one of the earlier ones. De'idama l'truma hatani truma v'idama l'chulin hatani l'chulin. Meaning, let's say it fits into chulin. Chulin's mentioned. Let's say you tell me it has the status of truma. Truma's mentioned. So maybe that's the reason why it's not listed separately. Who says you ran to hegdish and assume it's like hegdish? And assume like the Chachamim, maybe let's assume like Abba Shol that it's not like Hegdish, and maybe it'll be like already mentioned in the Mishnah somewhere else. So he says you're right. Chulin, he says, first we're going to bring a Bryce. So the Bryce is going to prove two Tanaim hold like Abba Shol that it's not Hegdish, and therefore let's say that Mefurish Brysa will tell me how to read our Mishnah. Says the Brysa, the Tanya, Chulin Shenasu Al Taras HaKodesh. This unique case, our case, Harehein Kechulin. Reb Elazar, Reb Tzadok, Omer Harehin Kitruma. So we have two different opinions, whatever it is, two different Tanaim. One says Truma, one says Chulin, but none of them say Hegdish. So you want to say, Rav Murray, that our Mishnah is Mashma, it's Hegdish. I mean, you're an Amayra, find me a Tana who agrees with you. Now, granted, of course you could. You'll find the Chachamim and Chulin. But the point is, in this bride, say it's only Truma and it's only Chulin. So I'll read the Mishnah. You don't mention a separate category called Chulin Shanas Al Taras HaKodesh. Maybe it's because it fits into what these two Tanaim will say it fits into. It either fits into Truma or it fits into Chulin. And really, this guy who's makbid to only eat his Chulin like it's Hegdish, halachically, it's the equivalent of Truma, maybe that it gets to a Shlishi, or it's the equivalent of Chulin that it only gets to a Sheni like a Prushim, but it doesn't become a Revi'i like Hegdish. So who says, Ramar, that you can bring a Raya? And he says, you know what, you're right. From the Reisha, I can't find anything in the Reisha to that effect. The fact that it's not there could be interpreted this way or that way, and there's no hechrach either way. He says, really, where is my raya from? What's the proof that I know the halacha is like the chachamim, or at least our mishnah is like the chachamim? And let me seifa. What does the seifa say? Yosi ben Yoez. Remember, at the end of the mishnah, after we brought all three halachas, we brought a maisa with two tanoim, and those two tanoim seemed to act in a way, and we treated them. We're going to see how we treated them. Sit in the mishnah. Yosi ben Yoezer hayachasid jebekahuna. So he was a kayan, and he was a very frum kayan, and he would be very makbid to make sure that whenever he would walk around, he wouldn't become tamei, so that he could eat his truma. He would be makbid on his hands. He'd be makbid on everything. And v'haisamat pachtay medras lekodesh, and afal pikein, despite the fact that he was the frummest of the frummest and the holiest of the holy, the halacha, the mishnah, that the next madrega up, if all you're being shomer for is A, then B, which is a higher needed shmira, the halacha is that it's going to be tamei for that person. So someone who's eating hegdish would become tamei from the beged that Yosi ben Yoezer handed him, because we have to be concerned that maybe it became tamei. That's not really relevant for our Gemara. The second part is the part that's relevant. Says the Mishnah, Yochanan ben Gudgada, and it happens to be, by the way, there are some girsas on the Mishnah that have this as unkelos, which I find very interesting. But either way, Yochanan ben Gudgada haya oichel al taharas hakodesh kol yamav. He was someone who is exactly who Rav Mari is talking about. You have an explicit case of someone who is acting with his chulin the same way he would act as if it would be hegdish, right? And what do you see? And since the level of shmira that he would have would only be for kodesh, it wouldn't be enough for the next madrega up, which is the mechatas, the ash is mixed in with the water that's used to purify a person who's tamei meis. So what do you see? That it's not good enough for the person who is touching the chatas. However, the chatas in the kodesh lo. It's mashma, though, that for other people who are actually eating hegdish, it's fine. So what do you see? The level of shmira required that Yochanan ben Gudgada used for his chulin, which was on the same sort of like stringency level as hegdish, was good for actual hegdish, meaning we don't make a distinction between him and someone who's actually watching for hegdish. So therefore, what do you see? You see from here, Olmo kisavra chulin shenas al taras kodesh ki kodesh damu, and that's his raya, and that's the end of the Gemara as it relates to Rav Mari. So just quick outside. Rav Mari said this unique person, a person who's makbid to eat his chulin as if it's like hegdish. Do we say or do we not say that what he's doing, whether it's his shmira or his kavana or all of these other halachas, that this is a unique category, that therefore his chulin will be treated no different than hegdish, that it become a shlishi, it could become a revi, or no, that's just for him in his own house if he wants to be from. But for the rest of us, we don't even have to rechenzech with it. We don't have to deal with it. No big deal. Which one do we say? Rav Mari says the first one. Where do I see it? I see it in the Mishnah. What do you mean the Mishnah? from the fact that it doesn't list the category, maybe that just means it's like truma. Maybe that just means it's like chulin. It says no. From the maskana, from the seifa of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah mentions a specific person who was makbid to eat a chulin exactly this way. You see, the only problem was that it didn't help for the next level up, but for the cross level of someone else on hegdish, the fact that he was pretending that it was hegdish, that's not pretending. He was identifying his chulin as hegdish. That's like it's hegdish.
So for everyone in the world, it could be matama.
Yeah, become a shlishi, become a revi. Yeah, absolutely. That's the point. That's literally the chiddush. And Abba Shaul, who's the Tana in Chulin, who argues with this idea, he says no, it doesn't become kodesh. What does he say? Well, you have two Tanaim. One holds that it just becomes regular Chulin, no different than Prushim. One holds no.
True.
It's enough to jump up to Truma, but not enough to jump up to Hekdesh. So meaning even that opinion is still a chiddush. You're telling me that a person who's makbid with Chulin, I don't want to use today.
Though, it's applicable to everybody now.
Yeah, that's the chiddush. The chiddush is that applies. Meaning it's not what you want to be from in your house. We don't have the whole concept, the whole conversation is irrelevant. But if you're telling me that now I'm going to take this piece of food that is not hegdish, it cannot become a shlishi or a revi, and now I'm going to let it touch actual hegdish. What's the halacha? Is that hegdish tameh or not tameh? So if you would have asked me, and I'm Aretz, I would have said, what do you mean? This guy, what he wants to do in his house, he identifies as a monkey. Who cares? That doesn't make him a monkey. I call my chulin hegdish. That shouldn't matter, right? Just because I think it's true, it shouldn't matter. What is it? The answer is it does matter. Meaning, according to the Chachamim, Rav Mori says our Mishnah is like the Chachamim. So it comes out we actually have three shitas, maybe four, right? Three shitas. We have the shita of the Chachamim who says it's mamish hegdish. We have the shita, I forget which Tana, who holds it it's chulin. And we have a shita, middle shita, who holds it's truma.
But if I decide tomorrow, listen, I'm not going to eat hummus the whole year because it might get in my book and everything. And that's how I'm going to do it. So, because of me, does that mean the whole Kavura here has to follow it too?
No,
because it can get so.
I understand where you're going. You're asking.
It's a little bit
No, I'm not gonna poke holes in this specific example. I think you're bringing up a fair point, which is what exactly is the understanding of how this works? Like, just because he thinks it sounds like it has like feelings of like a neder. It has feelings of, but like how could I? In Nedarim we say I can't prohibit your items on you. I can prohibit my items on you. So it has. I'm not saying that that's what's going on here, but it has feelings like that. That it seems like, well, it's my item, and I'm being noeg with it in a certain way, so a person can affect the status. The question is, how far does that status go? Yeah, no, here. It's a good question. I don't have a great answer for it. I don't know. Fair point. Okay. Either way, that's really one point. Next point. It needs also just a brief hakdama. So we know, we mentioned this yesterday, when we go to wash for bread, let's say, we talked yesterday about something called a hesach hadas, which means that if let's say your mind wanders and we don't know during those moments what you were doing, maybe your hands floated, maybe they touched, maybe this, whatever, we have to be concerned that perhaps you touched something tumah and you got to rewash, let's say. That's the reason we explain why when talking, people have this thought that it means that they got to go do it again or rewash, which isn't necessarily the case. Meaning if you throw on a pair of gloves after you wash, you can have the million conversations talking about completely unrelated things. There's no concern that you touch any tumah because you're completely wrapped from the tumah, so there's no big deal, right? So that's in Hilchos Netilas Yadayim, where the concern is absolutely about whether you touch something or not. In Tumah and Tara, in the Ikar Hadin, there's a separate din derabanan of Hesach Hadas. So it's a complicated area of halacha, but what it effectively means is that my relationship with my items, let's say if it's chulin because I'm from the Prushim, or I'm a Kohen and it's my Truma, or it's someone who's going to be eating Hegdish, whatever it is, I have to make sure that the item that is under discussion is constantly under my watch. Meaning, if for whatever reason I lose awareness of it, for whatever reason, even if it's impractical that it comes in touch with Tumah, there's a halacha b'derabanan, it's a maila that they made in Hegdish and maila that we made in Hilchos Tumah V'Tara, that if your mind is sort of divorced or disconnected from your item, that that momentary lack of das that you have about your item creates a Tumah derabanan. It does not mean that there's like some spiritual impurity, even if it didn't touch anything. Yeah. Well, okay. So now you're at, okay. So we're now about to, what you just asked me is going to be really the dion in the Gemara. At first, the Gemara is going to say it the way I said it, meaning this really vast, sort of generic, vague statement. If you don't have complete 100% das on it at any moment in time, then everything becomes tummy. You're like, whoa, 1 second. What does that mean? Does that mean if I have ADD, then that's it. All my stuff's tummy. I got to go to the mikvah. So we'll see. Says the Gemara. Now, as we go through it, we'll see this. I'll mention the parts that I need to bring in as we read it. But I also think, just from the shock, this is going to be I wouldn't say complicated Shaklavataria, but sometimes the Gemara will ask a question and then an answer and then a question and then an answer. It's easy to follow the linear progression. Sometimes the Gemara will just spend 15 lines, ask a question, and then clarify each assumption in the question to eventually get to the question again. And you're like 18 lines away from the beginning to the end. And if you're not paying attention, you could be like over there. And by the time we get to the question, you're like, well, I checked out because I didn't have a clue what the heck was going on in between. And now I'm back at the question, and it's like, well, I don't really even understand what's going on. So I want to step back and just on a high level, just explain what the Gemara is going to pretty much do from here to the Mishnah on a high level, so we can, from a GPS standpoint, always make sure that we're on the path. Yeah.
But I just want to say, I don't think we're talking about like having your mind on all your possessions at all times, like your pajamas in your drawer that are.
No, yeah.
So we're saying you're walking around. The guy you're talking to might, when he's talking, spit a little bit. That makes that garment tameh. If he's tameh. So unless you're paying attention to your stuff, it can become tameh.
Yeah,
That's the idea, right?
Yeah. But I wanted to start generic so that we can, like a funnel, we can sort of tighten it up as we go, because the Gemara is going to have a having like that. So okay. So just in terms of the Shaklavataria, in terms of the progression of the Gemara, we're going to start by saying there's a din called Hesach Hadas. It's a segue in the Gemara that has really no lot. I think there is a slight segue from the idea of before, but I don't think it's worth talking about. Maybe after, if I have a minute, I'll say. Either way, so says the Gemara like this: we're going to bring 3 cases, and in each one of these 3 cases, it's going to seem there's a problem of Hesach Hadas. That because of the Hesach Hadas, because, and again, just to clarify what Hesach Hadas means Hesach Hadas. There is how do you translate the word Hesach?
Distraction, taking your mind off something.
I don't know what the word Hesach actually means, but it basically means there's removal. So your das has been removed for a moment. It's like a temporary insanity and temporary lack of focus. Yeah. So we're saying that can create a tumah. Just the simple lacking of that on some level.
Temporary ADD.
A temporary ADD, right. So he touched on something, I'll just mention it, which is that we'll have to clarify, is this a practical concern that we have to be nervous, like I was using with Natilas Yadayim? Did you maybe perhaps touch something? Or is this like a Gzeres HaKosov type of din? We don't care if you're in a vacuumed up room with a cushioned wall, there's not a single iota of tum in there, doesn't matter. The moment your mind goes off, Rabbi said tumah.
Which is not so possible.
You have
thousands of items.
It's impossible. It would literally mean the moment you're not thinking about every item you have. Okay, so we have to know where in that spectrum. The reason why I talked about the time is specifically because I know we're going to be spending time on Amud Aleph. Amud Beis is going to go 2 seconds to the Mishnah. Okay, so now let's just figure out what the Shaklavataria of the Gemara is. The Gemara is going to be 3 cases, and in each one of those cases, there's going to be some type of a Hesach Hadas that on the surface it's going to feel like a little bit like what you just described. Really? That makes it Tameh? We're going to bring 3 cases. And then the Gemara is going to attempt to ask 3 questions. Now, it's in the question that the Gemara is going to spend a little bit of time clarifying, is that really a question? Are you sure that's a question? How does that work? That part, even if you get lost for a minute here and there, don't get nervous. It's just part of the question. So if we need to, we'll spend time on it, but we'll come back around, and at a certain point, we're going to get to the end of it, and we're going to point out that the assumptions in the question are good assumptions. We have a kasha on these 3 cases. Why would it work? And then we add a second question. And then we come to an answer. Simple. It's literally 3 cases that seem to be strangely called Hesach Hadas. The Gemara is going to ask a very obvious question. Then we're going to explain why the question's strong. And then we're going to come at the end of the day of the Gemara we're going to add a second question. And then we're going to answer, no, that's this and this is that. And then the Gemara is going to bring a raya to that answer. And we'll be holding by the Mishnah, which we'll pick up from there tomorrow. Says the Gemara. Amar Reb Yonasan ben Elazar, Nofla ma'afarto heimanu. A person is walking and he has a scarf. This is his kli. A scarf is a type of kli. Remember, clothing are kalim, and kalim can become tameh as long as they're above a certain size, right? So the halacha is, if let's say it fell off my head. Now, I'm not like overtly thinking about my scarf. Anyone who's thinking about his socks or his scarf or his gloves while he's walking is a crazy person. But it falls off my head. And Amar Lechavera, and I say to my buddy who's wind blows, it goes close to him, Tnoli, do me a favor. Can you give it to me? Pick it up and bring it to me. V'nasnalo, and he picked it up and gave it to me. Tameya. That seems like a little crazy, right? Why? Because somehow the fact that I'm no longer watching it, I'm no longer thinking about it, and even here, it's not even that I'm not thinking about it. It's like I'm watching it, it's going, I see it there. Oh, hey, buddy, can you pick it up? He picks it up, he walks it back to me. For some reason, landing in his hands makes it tameh.
Because he might be tameh. right?
So no. So we're talking about here of a case where he's the Haibin mensch. He's
The other
100%
guy might
tahor.
be
Other guy,
They're all tahor. Everyone's tahor over here. No question about it. I may not know if he's tahor or tameh, but if afterwards I find out that he's completely tahor, the halacha is tmeah. This is called the hesach hadas. We'll see in the Gemara exactly why. Says the Gemara, a second case. We're going to explain each one of these cases when we get to the end, because in the beginning they are a little bit
You
inexplicable.
could say look,
Yeah, could be. Yeah. Maybe at the end of the Gemara we'll have to say that.
I always wondered why that non-Jews are allowed to prepare your food.
In terms of?
They're not. They're not. They have to have special heterim for that. Yeah,
But
like
they
you,
do. Like
you
I just
turn
went
on.
across the street, I got a bagel.
There's something called bishul akum and a
Right.
piyas akum, and you have to find out those details. So it's not that they're allowed; it's that there are certain heterim that have to be followed.
You have to start a Jew has to start the fire. Is that one of them?
That's one of them.
yeah, see, that
But I'm
was,
just saying,
Yeah.
this had to do with slicing open a bagel and putting butter on it. I
I
mean,
mean, someone has to start.
What are you worried that he's going to put bacon in?
I don't know, what about her hands? What if she just ate something? What if she just
So
ate some
so
tree?
so their boss has to make them wash their hands. There are protocols. You're right.
I mean, without going off too much on a tangent,
That's why
but
people never eat out in restaurants. There are Jews who just won't eat out anymore.
I think it's very appropriate in a Gemara about hesach hadas for us to have hesach hadas and talk about something completely unrelated. But just for a moment, I'll just address one part of it, and we can talk about it afterward. Halacha, and this is a very important thing that I think for a lot of people it's hard to wrap their head around. You know, we live in a binary world. We think things are black and white. So is it kosher or is it not kosher? Is it tahor or is it tameh? The reality is that halacha is not here to tell us what happened. Halacha is here to tell us how to act in situations where we don't have complete knowledge. Meaning, what's a suffix? A doubt. A suffix is, I don't know. Is this piece of meat, did it come from the kosher store or did it come from the treif store? So I can't know. I'm not a prophet. I'm not Hashem. I have no clue. Halacha helps me determine how to act. It does not necessarily determine what happens. Two Edom walk into Bezdin, and they say, Reuven lent money to Shimon. That means Reuven lent money to Shimon? Just because two people said so? At best, it's circumstantial evidence, and even then, it's like the weakest type of circumstantial evidence. A video would certainly be better than Edom, but I'll tell you right now, if I have video in Bezdin, that's not Edus. I don't care how clear the picture on the video is. And what you'll say is because I can doctor the video. Well, human beings can doctor their voice. Doesn't matter. The difference is the Torah says 2 Edom makes a halacha, 1 Ed doesn't make a halacha. 3 Edom doesn't add anything. That's considered the same like 2. It's Xeris HaKasav. That this is how you act when you have this, and this is how you act when you have that. If I have a mikveh that has less than 40 saw, it's puzzle. What if it was 40 saw? A woman went in, and now I look and I see that it's less than 40 saw, and I have to know. Did she go in when it was already less than 40 or did she go in when it was 40? I have no clue and I'll never know. But halacha has a way of determining how to act. It still doesn't clarify what happened. So to answer your question, if there's a woman working in a store and I have to be concerned, maybe she did or maybe she didn't wash her hands before, after she ate her bacon and cheese, whatever, for lunch. And she might have some oil on her hands from pig. And that pig is getting into my bagel. And I think I'm eating glap kosher, and really I'm eating. But halacha is not here to help you figure out what happened. Halacha is here to figure out how to behave. And in that scenario, you do not have halachically a requiring to be concerned about something that is that unlikely. Now, is it possible? Certainly. But it's also possible she just murdered someone and the blood from that body dipped in. Are we choshesh for that? No. Why? Because that's insanely unlikely. So there's a level where we say that unlikeliness becomes sort of likely. And now we have to be concerned. So for instance, let's say there's a piece of bacon hanging off the side of her mouth. Well, guess what? Maybe I should be concerned that the stuff that's going on over there, I would probably fire such a woman because clearly she's not listening to the rules that the boss that you were mentioning is putting in place. I'm keeping the answer somewhat simple, but that's how halacha generally deals with things. And it's true, by the way, for Tumah and Tara as well. Tumah and Tara, Hesach Hadas, it's not about necessarily that I know for sure this woman or man who didn't, let's say, keep his mind on it, absent-mindedly, a tumah ran in, made him matameh, and then ran away. It's possible nothing was matameh. But halacha tells us you need to treat such a hesach hadas as if it's tameh, meaning what? Midrabanan it's tameh. So that's what we're discussing over here. So says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yonasan ben Amram nischafu lekelim shel Shabbos bekelim shel chol. This is the second case. You have someone who, let's say, has 2 suits in his closet. One suit is a Shabbos suit. The other suit is his weekday suit. Don't ask me. I don't have really either one. I generally don't wear suits. But okay, so I have a Shabbos clothing and I have weekday clothing. My Shabbos clothing, if I think I went to grab my Shabbos clothing and I ended up grabbing my weekday clothing, or the other way around, maybe for we'll see if it matters which direction you go, who love shun, and it's important that you wear them. Because the point is, like the rabbi over here was mentioning, if it's just sitting in my closet, that's called watched. But it's once I take it out, now I'm already thinking like, I'm not worried, for instance, what's hanging in my closet. But the moment I take it out, I have to make sure I don't get it stained. The person starts, the level of shmira drops significantly, and the requirement for him watching it goes up because we need to make sure that it doesn't come into contact with anything. It's safe in my closet. So I wear it. Nitmu, meaning if I thought I'm wearing my Shabbos clothing when it was really my chol clothing, or I thought I'm wearing my chol clothing when really it was my Shabbos clothing, it seems that it becomes tameh. Now again, here, why? Because it's a hesach hadas. On some level, my mindset on this clothing was not complete. That's the second case. So again, first case is talking about when my scarf fell and the other guy grabbed it. The second case is talking about where I thought it was A and it turned out it was B. Third case is going to be very similar to the second case. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Ma'aseh b'shtei noshim chaveiros, two women, choshev women who are makbed to not become tameh. Shenischalfu lehen klein bebeis hamerchatz. Their robes got split up in the mikvah. They each went to the mikvah. When they got out of the mikvah, they're very They're very so you can tell say a lot after. So right. So the mikvah, we're in the mikvah. The robes got hesach hadas, big time.
They switched their Borsellino hats.
Yeah. So we're in the mikvah. The women, they split their robes up. Oh, we just came back from Eretz Yisrael. Take a second.
It's a special case.
I just forgot for a second.
Yeah, the rabbi couldn't hold back because of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if someone walked in on random on a Tuesday.
Come back.
Rabbi, come join us. Come join us. Come join us. You can't possibly have any responsibilities right now. You just got back from Eretz Yisrael. Exactly. No one even knows you're here. Come sit with us. Feel a minute of Torah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Come sit next to us.
I'm really late to work. I have to go.
You have sit 30 seconds. 30 seconds to sit.
Okay. What you do?
Okay. Third case. Okay.
Look good.
Okay. There we go. Third case was a case where two women, they're in the mikvah after. Come for 30 seconds and help. Don't talk to them. Yeah. So the third case, what's the case? The case is two women. They go to the mikvah. They hang their robe up on the wall, and now they're leaving. And Rachel takes Leah's, and Leah takes Rachel's. So each one is now wearing the other person's things without realizing. Maybe it looks the same with a different towel. So the halacha over here, what's the halacha? They came in front of Rabbi Akiva, very choshev women. They wanted to know what the halacha was. Said it, v'timon. Zok Rabbi Akiva, it's tameh. Why did they tell me? Because of hesach hadas. So again, all three cases here, very light levels of a hesach hadas, and in all three cases, they're tameh. Ask the Gemara. Maskif lo Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Shaya asks a question. Now, just to clarify, this question will actually only be a question on number 2 and number 3.
Because
so again, there's a slight distinction. The first case is where it was in someone else's possession. I have my mind in it the whole time. The second case is there actually was a loss of awareness because I thought it was my Shabbos and it turned out it was my weekday. Or other way around. I thought it was my weekday and it turned out it was my Shabbos. Or the third case where, guys, doesn't help, yeah? So the third case is talking about where two women with the nida, so therefore the different robes. So I thought I was wearing she thought she was wearing her robe. It turned out she was wearing the other person's robe. So in that moment, there was a hesach hadas, and it created a tumah. Asks Rabbi Shaya,
why is the first case so different when your friend brought you the hat? I mean, I just didn't see the difference.
Well, again, it's not completely dissimilar, but it seems the Maila.
Yeah, of course, because you never have really hesach hadas in the first.
Meaning, no, they are the same.
You're watching it the whole time.
In terms of it not being, it really all depends on how you view your connection to the item and what the chesaron of hesach hadas is.
You're watching it the whole time. It fell off. You told the guy.
If shmira means your eyes on it, then yeah. But I'm saying, let's say I'm walking with my friend and I have my eyes on it the whole time anyways. Meaning I have to, in my mind, believe that's mine and have it in my possession. So I think the first case is a chesaron of possession, and the second and third case are what the rabbi's saying, that it's a chesaron. It's a problem in that I think it's one thing when it's not. I think that's the major distinction,
which is
the case that we're about to see. Says the Gemara, a person sticks his hand into a basket to go take a piece of bread, and it turns out that instead of getting wheat bread, he ended up coming out with barley bread. So are you telling me hachanami the nitmis? Now this question is a strange question because really, what do you mean? Yeah, maybe. Meaning you're not coming from a source that you have a problem. You're just saying, are you telling me from your three cases that yeah, that's what we're telling you.
Seemed irrational.
But yeah, it's almost as if the Gemara was responding the way we would respond by saying, are you kidding me? Are you telling me this is a hesach hadas?
Right.
You telling me if I went in to stick my hand, meaning you're basically ruining my entire life. That's almost like the Gemara is asking. The Gemara says,
nobody does this.
yeah, exactly. V'chitei mahachanami, the Gemara says, and if you'll tell me that that's true, right? He says, v'hatanya. Now the Rebbe Akiva Eiger asks a kasha over here, says, why didn't we just come with the v'hatanya to start with? If the Bryce is a raya, then just ask a kasha from a Bryce. Okay, whatever the answer is. V'hatanya. Hamishamer esachavis, becheskas shel yayin. A person watching over a barrel, thinking that the barrel is made of wine. V'nimtzes shel shemen. So the only thing here that's changed is what he thought was in the barrel. Just a wooden barrel. Is it wine? Is it oil? He thought it was wine, and therefore in his mind he was watching wine. The oil that it turned out it actually was, in his mind he was not watching. Tahira milatama. You see, it's tahar. The fact that I thought it was wine, and it turned out it was oil is not called hesach hadas. So the comparison between the second and third case is pretty straightforward. The robe A and robe B doesn't really matter. The fact that I thought it was A, and when it was B, or B when it was A, it really shouldn't make a difference because you see that it's tahar. Says the Gemara. 1 second. Read the whole brisa. The brisa in the Sefer says ulatamech, meaning at the end of the brisa it says ema seifa va'asuru mila'echol, that this shemen can't be eaten because it's tameh. Amai. Why is that true? Meaning according to you, that A mixed up for B doesn't make it a hesach hadas and tameh, then this hesach hadas should mean it's completely tahar. You should be allowed to eat it. So which one is it? Inherently in the brisa there's a problem. Rabbi Yirmiyah like this. Before we explain Rabbi Yirmiyah's answer, I want to explain just one quick idea. The language we use in describing tumah. Remember we said before a sheni could be chulin could become a sheni, truma could become a shlishi, and hegdesh should become a revi. So it's interesting. We keep on using the words tameh. But the truth is, it's not a very precise lashon all the time. Sometimes we use the word tameh, and sometimes we use the word pasul. And as far as tumah, it means the same thing. As far as whether it is tameh, they both mean tameh. Why would I use sometimes tameh, and why would I use sometimes pasul? It's very simple. I call something tameh only if not only is it tameh, but it can transfer tumah to a like item. So chulin, that's a sheni, is not called tameh. It's called pasul. Because chulin cannot make another chulin a shlishi. So therefore, a sheni that's chulin is called pasul, not tameh. Whereas truma that's a sheni, since it can be make the other truma a shlishi, is called tameh. The language is important. Now again, they both mean that it's tameh. Now the distinction is going to be, can it make the next thing tameh? If I call it tameh, it can. If I call it pasul, it can't.
So the last level on the chart we always call pasul.
Yes, a revi for hegdish is called pasul because it cannot make anything else tameh. Correct. So says the Gemara. We just asked the kasha. Remember, we're in the middle of the question, right? We asked the kasha. I have a brisa that effectively says mixing up A for B does not make something a hesach hadas. He says, okay, so what do I do with this case of the wine and the oil? There was a switch. On the one hand, it's tahar, and the other hand, it's tameh. I can't eat it, but it's not matama other things. So you see, there's already that distinction. Says Rabbi Yirmiyah, what do you mean? It's ba'omer shmartia b'midavar hametama v'loy midavar hapasla. It's exactly this. I had kavana. My shmira was over preventing it from becoming tameh, not preventing it from becoming pasul. So therefore, I can't eat it. Why? Because it's possible that something touched it that makes it pasul. Meaning maybe it's chulin or it's a liquid, which I don't want to get too much into the details of the halachas of mashkin. It's a little bit complicated. So we'll stay within the basic halachas that we just described. I have to assume that if I have a hesach hadas over it possibly becoming usher to eat pasul, then okay, then it's going to become pasul. But as long as I haven't had a hesach hadas over it becoming tameh, meaning that it can be matam something else, then the halacha is going to be that it's not that. So therefore, that's the distinction. But the point is, the distinction between if I thought it was A, if I thought it was B, that's not an issue. Meaning the fact that I thought it was wine and it turned out that it was oil isn't a factor in this case. And you see that it's either going to be usher to eat because I didn't have das on it, but when I did have das, when I was being shomer it, the fact that my shmira is good, despite thinking it was wine when it was really oil, is an irrelevant piece. So you see from here that distinction doesn't matter, and that's really explaining this question. So how come over here, if the lack of switching up A and B doesn't make it tameh, then why would switching A and B in the two cases make it tameh? Says the Gemara. Before we finish this question, there's an assumption in this question we have to clarify. You're telling me that I can have shmira that's split up, a little bit like multiple personality disorder in my shmira, like I'm shomer for A and not shomer for B. I'm watching it as watching. What's the difference between whether I'm watching it for this or I'm watching it for that? Says the Gemara, you could split up your shmira. Says the Gemara, no problem. Hatanya, this Hatanya is not a question. It's a proof. I'll prove it to you.
I'm watching the kids from kidnapping, but not from fighting.
There you go.
They can
Exactly.
fight.
You could, and again, there's a logic to that. But here, the Hatanya here is a raya. It's proof. Says the Gemara, Hoshit Yadu Basal. Let's say you have a person who's got a basket, okay, and he sticks his hand inside the basket. Let's say he's got figs. Rashi says, yeah. The Hasal al Kseifa and the basket is on his back. It's interesting. I think it's not relevant for our case. Why is he holding it on his shoulder, not on the floor? But either way, you have a basket filled with figs. The Hamagrefa b'sei Hasal, and it has a little scooper inside the sal. So you got some figs. You have a scooper, and you have a basket. Now, remember, Hesach Hadas makes something tameh. So that means you think you have a basket on your shoulder that has figs in it with a scooper. The Haya Belibay al Hasal, and the shmira that you're having is on the basket. The Loy Haya Belibay al Magrefa. You didn't know it was in there, or maybe you did, but you weren't thinking about it. Whatever. The point is, the shmira is split. You have the shmira on the basket. You don't have shmira on the Magrefa, the kli. Says the Gemara, Hasal Tahar, the basket's Tahar. Why? Because that you did have shmira, and therefore there's no Hesach Hadas. Because you did have Hesach Hadas. The Gemara is trying to prove this, that you can split up your shmira. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Again, this is like a third question on our assumption. Hasal Tahar, you told me the basket's pure? Why? The basket, even if itself you had a shmira on it, let the kli that's inside that's already tameh make the basket tameh. This is already irrelevant for our case, but this is just to understand the case here. Titma hamagrefa l'sal. Gemara says no. Ain kli matama kli. I'm going to explain this very briefly. Ain kli matama kli. One kli can't be matama another kli for a simple reason. Adam and kalim can only become a rishon. They can't become a sheni. Therefore, the kli that's inside this thing, at worst, we're not choshish that it was touched by mace. We're choshish for likely things like a nida, a zav. Well, if a nida and a zav is an of, then that means the kli becomes a rishon. That means once it's a rishon, it can't make another kli anything else, because a kli can only become a rishon. Therefore, ain kli matama kli. Any kli. And that's true for clothing as well. Ain kli matama kli means one kli can't be matama another kli. The only way it could is if it becomes an av. An example of that would be medress, which is in the Mishnah. It's a unique exception. Or if it came in touch with a dead body, which is an avatuma, so that makes it, a neviavos atuma, but that's a tangent of a tangent. So, okay. So says the Gemara, why is the basket tahor? Let the scooper be matame? No, the scooper, which is a kli, and the basket, which is a kli, ain magrefa kli matame sal kli. You can't do that. So okay, ulitma masha basal. You're right. It can't make the basket tame, but let it make the figs tame that are inside the basket. That it could. Ochlin can become a sheni. So let the rishon of the kli make the figs become tame. Says the Gemara, Amaravina, and this is the punchline for what we need for us. Amaravina be'omer shmartiv midaber shemetamo, the same distinction we made earlier. My shmira over the sal was over, I don't want it to become tameh in a way that it'll make other things tameh. The loy midaber hapaslo, but not from those things that only is going to be a final tameh that it can't make something else. So therefore, the magrefa, the scooper, is going to be tameh. Tameh meaning it's going to be potentially be matama other things, and that I was shomered from. So therefore, the figs are tar, the sal is tar, but I wasn't shomered from other things. But the point of the Gemara is you see that you can split up your das. So let's take a deep breath, come back, and say, what did we just do? We brought 3 cases. In each 3 cases, there was a hesach hadas that made a tameh. The last 2 cases, the hesach hadas was thinking it was A when really it was B. And the Gemara said, is that really such a thing? Is that called a hesach hadas? The Gemara says, yeah, it is, and I'll prove it to you. What's the case? The proof for the case is. We asked that as a kasha. Is that really such a distinction that makes it as hadas? We brought the case of wine and oil where there was no distinction. And then on that question, we had 1 second. Is that really a fair question? And at the end of the day, we're saying, yeah, it's a fair question. And that's really what we just did, just outside of the Gemara. Each part of it, as we got through, maybe a little bit here, a little not clear. Maybe this part's not clear. We could review it a little bit if you want, but it's a little bit complicated.
You're going to tell you, this is what I said the other day. You're going to tell yourself that you don't want it to be tameh. You're going to tell the same thing puzzle. You don't want it to be puzzle, right?
What do you ask? I'm not saying, what do you ask?
And here, that, if you already have it in mind that...
Yeah, you're asking about You're asking the same question before about, well, why would someone do this?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I need to know what happens if they did.
Because tuma is more severe than sul. Sul means you can't eat that food, but it won't spread.
It won't spread.
It's like 2 illnesses, one of which you could get and it won't spread, and one of which you could get and you get a little sick, but it does, but it could spread. So you might be more careful about the one that's spread. Like we're more careful about COVID than about something else that's not contagious.
But you just have.
I'll keep it
mind
simple.
always.
Here,
If you're
common.
ready, so-
I'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
If you're a regular guy, right, so you're going to eat chulin, right, even if it became tameh, right? Us normal people will do that. So for you, you might only want to make sure that the things you own don't become a rishon, because rishon you can't, right? Chulin can become a sheni, can't become a shlishi. So you might only want something to become. You might only want to make sure that nothing comes into contact that'll make it capable of being with something else. Once it becomes puzzle, you don't care because you'll eat that. I mean, that could be a simple explanation as to why this person. But again, it's really not so important why he would do it. The question is, what happens if it happens? And then I need to know what the halacha is. Okay. Is that our WhatsApp chat blowing up?
No.
No, it's my wife. Okay. Says the Gemara back. Okay. So what's the question? The question is 3 cases. Cases number 2 and 3, I exchange A for B, and therefore I think that's a hesach hadas. That's the Gemara. That's not a hesach hadas. The shemen with the wine case shows me that it's not a problem. And the Gemara says, after many different questions about it, that's a good kasha. So says the Gemara like this. Okay. Mikol Makam kasha. Mikol Makam kasha, the 2 second cases, A for B, shouldn't be a hesach hadas, and yet it is. Says the Gemara, v'od, a third question, or really a second and third question. V'od, Mosiv Rabba bar Avua Maisa Be'isha, Achas Sheboas Lifnei Rabbi Shmuel. There was a woman who came to Rabbi Shmuel. V'amra loy, and she said to him, Rebbe, beged ze aragtiv b'tahara. I made this quilt, and I did it, and I was tahar the entire time. I wasn't the nida, and therefore it's tahar. However, she says, I did not have complete shmira, meaning she's acknowledging that there's no way it's tameh, actual tameh, because I'm not a nida. I sewed it. I was not a nida. There's no tumah here. However, I can't promise that there wasn't a moment that I wasn't shomer it properly, which means there was a hesach hadas, and clearly she was concerned that maybe that's enough for it to become tummy. Now you'll ask, well, Mimanav Shach, if she's so frum that she knows it's possible for hesach hadas, and she's acknowledging that it had a hesach hadas, then shouldn't it be tummy automatically? Right? Why is she even coming to Rabbi Shmuel to ask the question? So the way the Mefarshim explain it is, it's because she thought that maybe the hesach hadas thing is only when there's a possibility it became tummy, but in her mind, it's not possible. It's literally like, I don't need a hechsher. Like, it's like going to a vegan restaurant. What do I need a hechsher for? There's no meat. There's no dairy. There's nothing there. I don't need a hechsher. It's not possible for it to become treif. There's nothing there that can make it treif. Same thing over here. She said, I'm not a nida. It's not tameh. So what's the concern? That I had hesach hadas and magically something flew through my window? That's not possible. So she thought maybe hesach hadas is only when there's a practical concern. So she came in front of Rabbi Shmuel. What did Rabbi Shmuel say? And from all of the questions he asked her, Amrullah, she said to him, actually, you know what, Rebbe, you're right. Nida mashcha imi bechevel. There was a friend of mine who popped over for a minute. She held on to the thread. She touched it, whatever it is. She's a nida. She moved it. It became tameh. Meaning, and so what did Rabbi Shmuel say? Rabbi Shmuel, Kama gedolim divrei chacham. How great are the rabbis? Meaning, they made this halacha called hesach hadas, and in their chachma, they understood that they made this hesach hadas halacha in order to prevent possibilities of tumah. Meaning to say, Rabbi Shmuel was making a sort of a frum comment. He was basically saying the rabbis, when they make their takanos, they make their gzeros, it comes with a level of prophecy to a certain extent, that they had such a level of wisdom that they understood a hesach hadas means tameh. It doesn't mean it's always tameh, no. But it means that even unlikely chances or things we might forget, hesach hadas is a real thing and therefore it's tameh. We'll see in a second what the question really is. That's not clear what the question is. It says the Gemara, another Maisa, exactly the same Maisa, just a slightly different. Shuv Masa be'isha acha shabas l'vei Rabbi Shmuel, same type of situation. A woman who came in front of Rabbi Shmuel, Amr Loi said to him, Rebbe, mapazu arakti b'tahara. I made this tablecloth over here, and I made it b'tahara, meaning she wasn't the nida. V'lo haya belibi l'shamra. But I didn't have a full shmira, meaning I had a hesach hadas from it. Is it tamei? Is it tar? Is it hesach hadas make it a problem? When we tof b'diko shahaya Rabbi Shmuel batka, and Rabbi Shmuel's questions, his investigations led to her saying, Amralei Rebbe, Nima Nifsika Li Ukshartia Bepeh. You know what, you're right. The needle I was using, I had to stick it in my mouth for a second. I got some spit on the needle. The spit of a Nida woman is a Rishon L'Tavatzah Masari. It's no different than her. And therefore, it got on the needle. And as long as it's wet, it could be Matama the Beged. So even though before it became a big enough Beged to become Tameh, now, and it is a big enough Beged, maybe the needle's still wet and still has a little bit of that Nida, Tumas Nida on it. And therefore, the Beged is Tameh. So therefore, says Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Kama Gedolim Divrei Chachamim Shayu Omrim Belibo L'Shomer Tahar Ein Belibo L'Shomer Tameh. Again, Rabbi Shmuel's observation that this woman thought she certainly wasn't Matamed, said she just had a Hesach Hadas, and it turns out that after investigation, that Hesach Hadas actually was the time when this other woman, so one second, where that other woman was able to touch it and make it a tummy. Now, one second, let's just clarify for just a moment. What is the question of the Gemara here? The first question we understood. I have a brisa. The brisa says, shemen and wine, the fact that you thought it was wine when it was shemen didn't matter, right? So therefore, that'll explain why it's a good kasha on cases number 2 and number 3. But what's Rabbi Shmuel really asking? What's these cases from Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel said to the woman who thought she had a hesach hadas that she asked B'dika. So the Mefarshim have different ways of formulating this question. I'm going to keep it super simple. You see clearly from Rabbi Shmuel that it wasn't just simply a Gzeres HaKasav, that, a Hesach Hadas, we don't care what it is. Once a person has a Hesach Hadas, they're tummy. He had B'dikas. He needed to figure out what's going on. There was a dialogue. Where'd you go? What'd you do? Did you touch this? Did you touch that? Why is he doing that? If there was a Hesach Hadas, it's a Hesach Hadas, and it's done. Obviously, Rabbi Shmuel felt that there has to be a conversation about how did we get to this point? It's possible, you're right, that every moment of the day, from that till now, you didn't have any Hesach Hadas whatsoever, and it sounds like Rabbi Shmuel would say that in that scenario, it's over. No problem. That Hesach Hadas is a practical matter, not necessarily just like a from Shemayim Gzeres HaKasav, if for a moment you're staring at the wall, it becomes tummy. So what's the question? Rabbi Shmuel is basically, the Maisa with Rabbi Shmuel is basically saying that really all 3 of those cases should not be a problem. Because in case number 1, you were watching it the whole time. There's absolutely no reason for me to think that there was any less of a shmira when it was in his hand versus when it was my hand. That was the first case. And in the 2 second cases, I'm watching your item thinking it's mine. You're watching my item thinking that it's yours. Or if I swap the robes, or whichever one we're talking about, my Shabbos clothing, in all scenarios, there is 0 drop. Nothing changed. It's mamish no different than the case of if it's sitting in a room, Tuma can't get to it, there's no reason to be concerned. So the question from the Rabbi Shmuel part comes from just acknowledging that this Hesach Hadas halacha is not like Gzeres HaKasav, it's a svara. It's logical, meaning if there's absolutely no way that it can become tameh under any circumstances whatsoever, then it seems we'd be masking that Hesach Hadas does nothing. So that's the question. So we have 3 questions really, 2 maisim from Rabbi Shmuel and 1 question from a brisa on all 3 cases. Says the Gemara.
So the second maisim from Rabbi Shmuel, she said she wasn't tameh when she weaved it. And then what does B'dika discover? That later, not when she was weaving it, she was
earlier, meaning earlier she had to tie a thread and she stuck the needle in her mouth.
But not when she was weaving it.
Not when she was weaving it, but the saliva on the needle, which is still wet, after she got the beged big enough, after weaving it, maybe it hadn't dried enough yet, and therefore that saliva, which is an av.
Maybe it was after she wove it, a thread broke and she had to
Could
tie
be that'll make it a lot simpler.
The earlier investigation was only while she was weaving it, she wasn't needle.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Says the Gemara. So I have a kasha. Effectively, this long question comes to the following head, and he says as follows. Gemara says like this: Bishlam ala Rebbe Lazar bar Tzadok, the case where the robes, one woman goes to the mikveh, the other woman goes to the mikveh. I can explain that case. Kol achas va'achas omeres chavarti eishes amaretz. Maybe each woman says, I know I'm makbid on Tumah Tara, but maybe my friend isn't. Therefore, even though, I'm not really watching it so well, but the point is, I had Hesach Hadas, it's a real Hesach Hadas. There's a possibility that this woman, now, she might not actually be someone like that, but that's already called a Hesach Hadas because I'm like disconnected from my property because there's another person involved.
Right.
And that woman she disconnects her mind from the item. And also the case of Rabbi Yochanan ben Amram is also not shver. Nami is okay. Why? That it's called Hesach Hadas. Kivan the Kalim the Shabbos Ovid Lehushim Tfei. People watch their Shabbos clothes more than they watch their weekday clothes. Therefore, grabbing my clothing, thinking it's weekday clothes, provided it is 60% level shmira, that I would have had 100% level if it would have been Shabbos. Therefore, it's also called misich daiti minayu. That's also called like there was something missing, and we don't know. Maybe something slipped in during that moment. However, asked the Gemara, the third case, really the first case, Elul Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar, the case of my handkerchief fell and he picked it up. Why is that not good? What's the difference if he's watching it or I'm watching it? It's fully watched. There's absolutely no concern. So on this, the Gemara answers, no. What we say is that if I have an item that falls into your hands, there's an understanding that because since I know that I'm tahor. I don't know if you're tahor or tameh, and therefore, if it falls into your hands and I don't say anything to you, and I say, hey man, can you just go pick it up for me? I'm clearly okay with the possibility of you picking it up, and it's possible you're tameh. That in and of itself is a lack of shmira. The fact that I'm dropping how much I'm watching this item because it's no longer me in complete control, but I'm now letting someone else go pick it up who I don't know his status, that in and of itself is like a gilui das that I'm not 100% concerned about whether it becomes tameh or tahor. And even though practically it's not possible for it to become tameh because Lamafreya, I realize the guy's a completely tahor person, that's already called enough of a hesach hadas that it's going to become tameh. Now, before we go weiter, I just want to explain. So what the Gemara is basically saying at the end of the day is that although Hesach Hadas is not Exeris HaKasav, it's not a entirely 100% practical matter. Is it possible? Meaning it's possible to say that the Hesach Hadas is specifically going to make something Tameh when it's possible, however distant and possible it might happen, that's already called enough that no matter how far the Chashash is, that's already close enough that we'll say that that's called a hesach hadas.
In other words, once you enter the area where there are problems, we say low flow.
Yes, low flow.
We don't want to start distinguishing.
Right.
But when it's in your closet, we don't begin.
Yeah, right. Meaning to be choshish for something insane, like, oh, I know what happened. A dead sheretz flew in. Like you have to be realistic about the
broke into my house without a remnant, and touched all my stuff.
No. Okay, so now
It's not only reliant on a second person.
No, because only two of the cases had two people. One of the cases was my own Shabbos suit.
Right, and that you're still saying is Hesach Hadas.
And the difference is, even though it's only once I've taken it out. If it's in my closet, it doesn't change. Once I take my suit out, thinking that it's my weekday suit, and it turns out it's my Shabbos suit, the level of shmira on my weekday suit is not high enough the way I would watch my Shabbos suit.
Afterwards.
Right, meaning my jeans, I don't care if it gets a stain. My pants, I do. So says the Gemara. In the answer of the Gemara, we're making a distinction and saying that one human being cannot really truly watch something for another person. Because if I don't know your status, that immediately puts the item in somewhat of a more precarious shmira, and that's enough of a disconnection for me that it's called like I'm not watching it, and therefore it's tummy. Ask the Gemara below, is that really true? Vehatanya. We'll just take it to the Mishnah. Vehatanya, haresha yu chamara vupolav. And the important point here is these people were travelers, like they were on donkeys and they were workers. They were amei haaretz. These are people who don't know the halachos of Talmud Torah. Therefore, a person has to be choshesh that they're tamei, the stuff they're touching is tamei, and therefore they make stuff tamei. So says the Gemara, Vehatanya, haresha yu chamara vupolav. To unin taharos, and they're carrying all my stuff. We're going on a trip, and they have all my taharos, all things that are tahar in their baskets or whatever it is.
Quarters.
Right. Afal pishe hiflig mehen yosim mil. Even though there has been a distance between us traveling of 2,000 amos, which is a tremendous amount of space. It's almost a space where if I would look at them on a flat ground, I may not even be able to see them.
Was that Chum Shabbos 2,000?
The same exact amount. Yeah. Taharosov tahoros. We don't have to be concerned that the Amaretz went ahead and made him tameh. Why? Because even though I'm so far away, they don't know, and I'm sort of let the cat out the bag, is they don't know how far away I am. They don't know how quickly I'll be able to come check on them. There's a little bit of fear, and therefore they're not just going to go and start messing around with my taharos.
The workers in the restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
The boss.
This is a new concept that they're introducing here.
Yeah, it's a similar concept to like a mashgiach who's nichnas v'yotze. He doesn't have to be in the store all the time.
One might think that because
maybe they'll pop in.
Right.
Now says the Brisa. However, if the owner says, you guys go ahead, and I'll follow up. Meaning,
I'll meet you tomorrow. I have a fun meeting.
Yeah. Like if you happen to know the mashgiach is going to be away on a couple of days on business, when the mice, when the cat's away, the mice play. Yeah, okay. Even though it's less than a mil, meaning once my eyes are no longer watching them, this sounds like a hesach hadas, right? Taharos of timeos. So what do you see? You see that from the Reisha, it's tahar. From the Seifa, it's tameh, and it seems like the Gemara is bringing this brisa without acknowledging the very obvious distinction that when I let the guy know I'm not going to be around versus when I know that I am going to be around. But let's leave that out for a moment. The Gemara says, what's really the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa? Maishna Reisha, Maishna Seifa, which is really not the right gears. So Rashi says there's a different gears in the Gemara, but he says the point of the question is, I have my items by somebody else, and we just said 2 seconds ago that the second it goes in someone else's hands, that's already considered not a shmira. So who cares that they're concerned I'm coming? Who cares they're concerned I'm not coming? There should never be a scenario where it's tar. It should always be tameh. What does it mean that it's tar? That's the way Rashi explains the question. Says the Gemara, or Mari B'tzak Nafcha. What do you mean? He explains the case as a unique case. Reisha b'metayr chemora v'polav l'kach. Meaning when I hired these guys, I shoved them in a mikveh, and therefore they're tahor. I don't trust them, but who cares? I don't need to trust them. I made sure they're tahor. But second, if that's the case, then why is it tummy in the second case? Meaning, who cares? The fact that I told them that you go ahead, that if they're tahor, I shouldn't have to be worried. Safe anami. Mara says, no. Meaning him, I'm not concerned about. One of his buddy meets him on the way. His buddy's not necessarily didn't go to the mikvah. So the Gemara flips it back. 1 second. If I have to be concerned about his friend, why don't I have to be concerned about his friend in the beginning? The Yachi Reisha Nami, his friend's going to come and meet me and he says no. It's talking about where it's this type of scenario where I'm traveling in the Reisha in such a way where I can always come from an angle in a brief moment, and they won't even realize that I'm there. So therefore, there's a level of fear. It keeps it
Same like
tar.
having the cameras at all times.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's the case, then why isn't this? I mean, again, we're going to go back and forth. I can come that angle. He says no. Even the amr lahu lechu, that already. Even though you're right, I can come at any moment. But once I say lechu, that's giving them enough confidence. I'll come later. They now feel confident enough that they can pop open my bag and see what I have. Maybe they're going to want to eat a cherry from what I have over there, and all of a sudden they're going to touch it. Maybe they're going to let their friend touch it. Hey, my dumb rich Jewish guy over here, rich guy, he's got all his food over here. Come take a bite, and they'll accidentally be on my stuff, and therefore I have to be concerned that it's going to be tummy. But la'olam, yeah, if it goes to someone else's property, it becomes tummy because that's kadas. Hadran, Allah, Ein, Darshan. We'll pick up from the mission tomorrow. Mouthful, the first stop here. Last stop.
We're just not